Tim Bailey was a bit of a weakling. He was bullied at school and he didn't really get on with many people. He kept himself pretty much to himself. He worked as a humble little bank clerk in the local county bank. One of the things that he did like to do, though, was visit charity shops. He couldn't understand why people would spend so much money on brand new clothes when you could get amazing bargains at the charity shop. And he would rifle through the shelves and through the hangers and find shirts and trousers and jackets and woolly jumpers. And it was absolutely marvellous. And he would get them for such a little price. Anyway, he was doing that one day, finding some bits and pieces whilst on his way to work. And his eye caught some boots, some lovely black shiny boots. Now, ordinarily, he wouldn't buy boots or shoes from a charity shop because somebody else had worn them, and the way they walked and the way their feet were would have worn them funny and they wouldn't have been comfortable, and he never quite felt happy wearing somebody else's shoes. But these shoes, there was something about them that appealed. They were shiny, they looked comfortable, they just looked nice. So it wouldn't hurt, he thought, just to try them out. So he took his old dilapidated shoes off and put these on. And the minute he did, he felt they were for him. He walked up and down and figured, yes, they would do nicely. So he bought them. And he took the old shoes that no longer fitted and had holes in them and just dropped them into a bin on the way to the newsagent, which he often popped into before going to work. And in the newsagent, he liked to pick up the local newspaper so he could see where jumble sales were or car boot sales or that sort of thing, to see if he could find a few more little bargains. He'd paid for the paper and he was just on his way out when 3 youths came rushing in, shouting and screaming. They brandished knives in their hands, and one of them suddenly rushed towards the shopkeeper and stuck it up against his neck. "Right, mate, let us hand over the goods," they shouted. And one of them was guarding the door, and the third was helping himself to alcoholic drinks, to lottery tickets and cigarettes and goodness knows what, shoving them all into a bag. And then, just when they're ready and finished getting all the stuff they wanted, they headed off towards the door. Now, what possessed Tim, who was this frail, weak, scaredy cat of a bloke, to do this, he will never know, because as they rushed towards the door, he suddenly kicked it with his boot so that it slammed shut, and all 3 went careering through the plate glass window. It smashed and they went falling onto the street with cuts and bruises. And just at that moment, incredible, amazing timing, a police car pulled up on the pavement, by the pavement, and rushed out 2 burly policemen, picked up these youths and shoved them into the vehicle, taking them off to the police station. Well, a few minutes later, some statements had been given and Tim was allowed to carry on his way. And he is thanked for looking after and saving the community from these hoodlums that the police had been trying to catch for some time. Well, still slightly shaken by this, Tim thought, well, I better still go to work. And now, normally, to get to work, he would go down through an alley and down along the old canal, which he did. And as he got onto the towpath, he saw there was a bit of a commotion a little ahead. There was a little old lady who seemed to be protesting to this big burly chap, big, rather nasty looking bloke who was trying to grab her handbag. And he was snatching it and she was protesting, and suddenly at one point this big nasty bloke gave her a whack in the face and she fell to the ground, releasing her hands from the handbag. And he started to stomp off towards Tim along the towpath. What possessed Tim, he does not know, but he felt as if he was compelled, and without a second's thought, he suddenly raised his leg and gave this bloke a massive great boot between the legs. The thug suddenly just collapsed down, winded from this blow, and before he could recover, Tim had already raised the other leg and gave him another boot on his backside, sending him flying into the canal with an almighty splash. The handbag had fallen to the ground, and Tim instinctively picked it up, ready to return it to the little old lady. As he did so, he noticed that a couple of policemen were already dashing down to the towpath and were coming to their aid. They saw the guy swimming in the canal and they commended Tim on his swift action. "We've been after him for some time." Tim gave back the handbag, and again some more statements were given, and later he was released to go. Meanwhile, the thug had been arrested and carted off in a police car back to the station. Well, Tim was naturally a little bit late for work at this point, and when he got in, he tried to explain what had happened to not only his supervisor but his work colleagues, and they really didn't believe anything. They looked down at his shoes and they were still shiny and new and undented, apart from the fact he'd kicked a door and he'd kicked this bloke into the canal. They said, I think you're telling porky pies, mate. No, it's true, it really did happen. No, they didn't believe a word of it, not even at the end of the day when they were locking up and cashing up all the proceeds. Most of the other workforce had gone home, and the key holders and Tim were just about to leave when suddenly the door was kicked open and two blokes with balaclavas and sawn-off shotguns came racing in. "This is a raid!" they shouted at the top of their voices. Tim and the others backed up immediately. "Get on the floor!" shouted one of the gangsters. Nobody was going to argue with a man with a sawn-off shotgun, and instinctively they fell to the deck. "You!" said one of them. "Get up! Show me where the money is! Take me to the safe!" The guy who was on the floor, one of Tim's colleagues, started to get himself up. But before he had a chance, Tim suddenly found he was on his feet. It was as if his shoes had just lifted him up. And then before he knew what was happening, the guy was going, "I didn't talk to you, I talked to him." And as he spoke, Tim had already lifted his boot, kicked the gun clean out of the bank robber's hands. It spiralled over and hit the wall. Fortunately, it didn't go off. And the next breath, the other gangster had seen what was happening, panicked, dropped his gun, and had already gone for the door, straight into the arms of a policeman who was bundling through the door. Before Tim realised what had happened, the two gangsters had been cuffed up, they'd been led out and put into a police van. He couldn't quite get what had happened. It was as if the police had been waiting for the gangsters to actually go through with it. Tim was once again commended and thanked for his swift action 3 times in a day. He couldn't understand it. He looked down at the shoes, these second-hand shiny black shoes, and thought, there's something going on here, there's something funny. Every time I was in trouble, it was as if these boots, these shoes were controlling me. Well, the next day he marched in to the charity shop and he placed the shoes on the counter. He says, "I can't have these, I'm bringing them back, they're bewitched." "Oh," said the little lady behind the counter. "Oh, that is a shame, you bringing them back. That's the 3rd time this week that someone's come in with P.C. Blakely's old police shoes. We really have a lot of trouble trying to sell them." "Police shoes?" said Tim. "Oh yes, P.C. Blakely, you must have known him. He was the bobby on the beat, been on the job for 30 years. And they were the same shoes he had when he started. Look at them, they're almost brand new, pristine, hard to believe. But he did say that everywhere he went, he seemed to be led to the scene of the crime." "Oh well," said the little old lady as Tim was ready to leave, "I do hope the next purchaser was looking forward to an adventure." Cheers.